So in 2018, Gavin Newsom ran for governor and insisted that he wanted a single payer healthcare system in California. And as with all establishment Democratic politicians who are influenced by lobbyists or the healthcare industry, Newsom would rather water down that promise to universal healthcare. And that's an important distinction, the difference between single payer and universal healthcare, because universal healthcare means everybody gets healthcare coverage. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing to aspire to, everybody getting healthcare coverage. But how they're covered is a big sticking point, because single payer healthcare is a type of health insurance where there is a single payer of that health insurance, that single payer being the government. And the benefits to that, while some will argue that, oh no, the government's involved, that's going to cause chaos and bureaucracy and mismanagement. True. But think about the chaos and bureaucracy and mismanagement of our current healthcare system, where we spend more than any other developed country for worse outcomes. Many other developed nations have universal healthcare systems. A lot of those healthcare systems are single payer, not all of them. You can have a universal healthcare system that is single payer. You can have a universal healthcare system that isn't single payer. And that distinction, that difference, is what Gavin Newsom is hoping people don't understand, because then he can, say he's fighting for people, but really isn't. It's the typical Democratic Party story. So I want to shout out Walker Bragman, who writes in the Daily Poster, started by David Sirota. And he does some really good coverage on Gavin Newsom's, sort of wishy-washiness here. And so I'm going to be reading a lot from this article. But when it comes to going for universal healthcare coverage in California, he writes that, quote, the state has been down this road many times before, going far back as 1918, when voters rejected an effort to create a state healthcare system for the poor. Single-payer legislation finally made it out of committee in 1992 after Governor Jerry Brown, Democrat, endorsed it at the time during a Democratic presidential primary that year, but the effort ultimately failed in the state Senate. Then in 1994, the California Nurses Union pushed Prop 186 to establish single-payer healthcare in the state, but the measure was overwhelmingly defeated following a campaign by a coalition of business groups, insurance companies, and hospitals. So it's a story that happens all the time in California. Politicians try. The insurance companies and insurance lobbyists and healthcare industry gets involved because they don't want a single payer. They don't want the government to be the payer of that health insurance, because that means those health insurance companies are out of business in California. And California is a very populous state and a very major market, and a lot of expensive health insurance related costs happen in the state. And so it would be a good benefit to them to have a situation where they can continue to have private healthcare in this country, or in this state, rather, definitely in this country. So while state lawmakers succeeded in passing single-payer legislation in 2006, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, a Republican, vetoed the bill when it arrived at his desk and vetoed an amended version of the legislation 2 years later. So you had a Republican governor and Democratic state lawmakers who were really close to passing single-payer legislation, but it was ultimately vetoed because you had a Republican governor. So sometimes you have Democratic interest, but, they say the lobbyists ultimately influence those Democratic Party interests, and nothing gets done. Then the Republicans come in charge. You get Democrats who are less tied to those lobbying interests because they're just state senators and they're state lawmakers. They put something forward, but you have a Republican governor. And so therefore, it just got vetoed every single time. Of course, they didn't want that. It was business interest. It was financial interest, but also just against Republicans to offer healthcare on a universal basis in that way. So to continue to quote from the article, in 2017, when single payer came up again in California, it appeared more likely to pass. The state had already dramatically expanded healthcare coverage in response to the Affordable Care Act, and Democrats had held supermajorities in both chambers of the state legislature, and Brown had once again been elected governor. At the same time, polling showed that most Californians supported the creation of a taxpayer-funded universal healthcare system. So all the cards were aligned in this case. You had Democrat control of the governorship of the state legislature, and Californians supported a taxpayer-funded universal healthcare system. But what happened then? And this is also a time not to mention that Bernie Sanders was getting a lot of appeal nationally for campaigning on Medicare for all. So what happened? You got to know something happened. So, as it's written here, Blue Shield of California, which is a major insurance company, have been a major donor to Newsom and state Democrats. Blue Shield has donated at least $99,000 to Newsom's campaign since 2010 and $2.7 million to the California Democratic Party since 2006, according to data from the National Institute on Money and Politics. That includes a $1 million contribution to the state party last summer as Newsom was working to fend off a recall effort. So, Blue Shield of California, an insurance company, gave Gavin Newsom $1 million check, in addition to the countless hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars rather, that Blue Shield has given the Democratic Party and Gavin Newsom over the past 10 years. And Gavin Newsom's been a very integral part of the Democratic Party over the past 10 years, whether it was mayor of San Francisco to lieutenant governor to regular governor. He was a major part of Democratic Party politics and continues to be, because he is trying to become the next president of the United States. He's just one of those politicians you can very clearly tell he's on that track. A lot of politicians are very opportunistic in this nature and are spending their entire political project on getting themselves to be president. Gavin Newsom's just one of those more nakedly obvious instances in that matter. State records show that Blue Shield donated $100,000 to Newsom's inaugural fund in 2019 and has made several other sizable contributions on Newsom's behalf. The largest was a $20 million donation in 2022 Enterprise Community Partners to support Project Home Key, which is the governor's COVID-19 homelessness housing initiative. So Blue Shield is giving all of this money to Gavin Newsom. And what is Gavin Newsom giving them in return? Well, for starters, Newsom awarded Blue Shield a $15 million no-bid vaccination contract and recruited the insurer's CEO to shape the state's COVID-19 testing strategy. So you're going to have these people who have been very integral in the Democratic Party and Gavin Newsom's campaign now getting to shape the COVID-19 response in California. But what you're also getting is the continual blocking of Medicare for all in California, or a single payer option. Medicare for all is just a shorthand for single payer healthcare, essentially. But by blocking single payer healthcare in the United States, by blocking single payer healthcare in California, Gavin Newsom continues to get the support from Blue Shield, whose interests are definitely aligned in that matter. It's not just Blue Shield. The insurer, to continue from the article again, shout out to the Daily Poster and Walker Bragman for doing all of this great work. It's important to highlight when these reporters are gathering all these data together so that I can really quickly talk about it and make these connections for why it matters for people. But the insurer Anthem and its affiliates have donated $78,000 to Newsom's campaign since 2013, on top of $770,000 to the California Democratic Party since 2002. Anthem also gave $25,000 to Newsom's inaugural fund in 2019. And Blue Shield and Anthem are part of a coalition lobbying against this legislation, claiming it would create a, quote, new and exorbitantly expensive government bureaucracy and cause significant job loss to California. That significant job loss would be the jobs those insurance companies would no longer have because their existence would be rendered redundant. However, you would still have a bunch of people in California who needed healthcare services. So those people would likely be able to find jobs for the new California healthcare scheme. And again, as I said earlier, when you have a bunch of different healthcare companies in California, you have Anthem Blue Cross, you have United Health Group, you have Blue Shield, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have Kaiser Permanente of Northern California, Kaiser Permanente of Southern California. You have so much complexity already with a bunch of private companies offering layered services on top of each other in the state of California, as well as throughout the entire United States. That is what a substantial part of what contributes to the out of control healthcare costs that we have in this country. And so United Health Group is saying that single payer would increase these costs when in reality it would lower these costs. And you don't have to look at me or Bernie Sanders or any of the other actual studies that have been done on this. Look at the other countries who have done single payer healthcare systems who get similar or better, largely better healthcare outcomes that Americans get at a much better price per capita. You can even look at Germany, which has a partially private healthcare system that is still universal and still covers most Germans, if not all Germans. All Germans it does, because it's a universal system. But it's still private. There are ways to do this in a way where businesses can still be happy and, more or less you get the outcome you want, which is no one has to worry about medical bills because that's covered. That's part of what you've already paid for in taxes. That's part of what the government already provides for in the society. Maybe it's in partnership with private entities, or maybe it's all on its own because that's largely more efficient. But as this article says, whether it's Newsom's relationship with Blue Shield, Anthem, and United Health, whether it's Newsom's relationship with Blue Shield, Anthem, and United Health will impact his decision-making on CalCare, the universal healthcare scheme, is an open question, says Court at Consumer Watchdog. Court at Consumer Watchdog being, I'm trying to go through the article here. Sorry, I should have read this more closely, but I want to say it is a person named Court. But nevertheless, he says, I've seen him do it and I've seen him not do it. Let's put it that way. I've seen him go against the unions that represent oil companies by putting a limit on setbacks and banning fracking. I don't know. For some issues like single payer, I've got to believe he's ideologically there. So it's just people are unsure about where Gavin Newsom really stands on these things because he's so wishy-washy, like so many Democrats are. And so we'll keep watching because there are a lot of people who supported Gavin Newsom who really care about single-payer healthcare, rightfully so. And they're watching Gavin Newsom on this, and they might be watching Gavin Newsom do one of those sleight of hands that the Democratic Party is known very well for doing, that once again shows that the Democratic Party is not interested in delivering for voters. They're just only interested in maintaining their own power structures and getting money so that they can continue to do that and build their own wealth for themselves. And so there you'll get another generation of Democratic Party voters who are bored with the party. They're over the party. They're tired of the party. And what'll they get? What'll they deserve? This is what happens when you don't deliver. And so that's kind of the story of how Medicare for All in California appears to have died yet again. And you don't see a lot of coverage of this from the Jimmy Dore types out there. Any of the people who are saying you should force the vote on Medicare for All and get it happen on a national level. You also need to focus on when these fights happen at a local level, at a state level. Because as a lot of these comedians and pundits will say, you oftentimes can't get a lot done at the national level. You have to work somewhere else. You have to work outside of that system. And it's hard to do things at a state or a local level, but it's actually easier because it's people who are more closely accountable to you and less people to deal with and manage. I've made many videos about this. Again, my Dan from the Internet video, Bad News, you can check out on youtube.com/Dan from the Internet, is a good way to start learning about these things. And I should get these uploaded for members as well. That'll come down the pike soon. But we need to watch all of these possibilities of Medicare or universal single-payer healthcare programs happening in states and make sure we support them because that's what real leftists do.